It is the Monday edition of the Athletic Hockey Show, and we're back in these seats finally. Ian Mendes, Julian McKenzie. Boy, it's been, I don't know, a month since we've done this on a Monday.
Yeah,
Julian?
about that.
Something
yeah,
like that.
It's been quite a long layoff, at least for both of us, and also producer Chris is back with us too.
Yeah. So we're jumping right into it because, usually this is
to.
the quiet time in the news cycle in hockey, right? Training camps are opening this week. You rarely get a seismic piece of news in the middle of September, but we did on Sunday night, afternoon, actually. Mike Babcock announcing his resignation from the Columbus Blue Jackets before he even coaches a preseason game. Aaron Portzline, we said this, the busiest person in hockey today. I think this is one of 9 radio/podcast interviews that he's doing. I think I got that right, Aaron?
Let me hydrate here. It's something like that. I'm not counting. Plus, somewhere here, there's got to be a story written or two. So it'll be a full day. But that's it's better to have a lot to do than not enough.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I forgot you're a writer as well. Not just
that's his main responsibility.
Right.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly.
Hey, so listen, take the listeners through this. What this kind of news cycle has been from the time that Paul Bissonnette dropped this piece of information on the Spit and Chicklets podcast. I mean, at that point, did you think that there was even a chance for this to be tenuous for Mike Babcock? Like take us through this week for you.
Yeah, well, not immediately. I mean, it was certainly a story of interest because what he threw out there was it was quite the allegation, and the stories we published early were nothing more than here's what Bissonnette said, here's what the NHL, the NHLPA, and some veteran players say in response. Not taking a side, not who's right, who's wrong here, but simply here's what people are saying. And there were conflicting viewpoints. There were players, there was the NHL, and frankly the PA early on, thinking that this was not a big deal, that this had been maybe overblown a little bit in its telling. But I think it changed the following day. It became a story with legs, as we say, the next day when the PA came to Columbus to talk to players and did its own investigation. At that point, they had heard from other players that they did not take this as an innocent interaction, a coach just trying to get to know his players. That for some guys, at least, it went beyond that. And so that kind of perks your interest that this is not going to be a one-day story that just goes away. And then it just seemed to get more serious as the weekend goes. Mike Babcock travels with the team to Traverse City for the Prospects tournament, and then he's there for the first day, and he's not there Saturday. Everybody else with the Blue Jackets, to my knowledge, remained. Jarmo Kekalainen remained. Most of his staff around him remained, but Mike Babcock left. What does that mean, if anything? And then you're hearing from players around the league alleging this or having heard this, and you just get the sense that this was not just simply a coach. Hey, share pictures with me. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous looking back on it. We have ways of sharing pictures. That doesn't require give me your phone, right? I mean, it's a pretty easy world right now in terms of picture sharing. So all of it just seemed kind of at least strange at the beginning, but then it became obviously more serious as it went along. And then yesterday we started to get word that he was done. Is that him resigning? Is that him being fired? Anybody else going with him? There's all these sort of questions. And then it became official. We had it fairly dead to rights around 3:15, 3:30, but not made official until 4:00. And then by then the whole world knew. So,
jeez. I'm curious about the players who stepped up and said something felt wrong, because we've seen people like Boone Jenner and Johnny Gaudreau say that it was effectively harmless. So I'm very curious about who in that locker room or what type of player ended up going to the PA and saying, no, I felt uncomfortable. Do we have a sense of who might have said something?
Yeah, I don't know if it was a player or players in the Columbus room. My sense is it was also players from Babcock's previous stops who were like, that sounds familiar. I went through that too. So, you know, today's media day, literally none of this is going to be about the season coming up. There may be some questions, but the predominant feel of this is going to be, about the Babcock situation. And one of the questions that I think is perfectly fair to ask to Boone Jenner, to Johnny Gaudreau, is, what you said. If you had to make a statement today or a comment today on this, is it a different statement or comment than it was earlier in the week? And I'm willing to give them, I think we all should, the benefit of the doubt at this point. It is possible that their interactions as veteran players with Babcock were different than the interactions between Babcock and young players. If you look at Boone Jenner's statement, it is limited to his experience. And sometimes in hindsight, you read things differently than you did at the time, knowing what you know. So Boone is a guy that likes to keep things simple. He is one of the more respected players in this league, really, but also in this room. But I think he will have some tough questions today, and it does call into question this room. Is it still a galvanized room in the same direction, or are there players? Is this fractured because of this? I certainly don't want to make that leap. And a player last night told me that the players, it still feels all together to him. But I think that's a question that bears asking.
What's the feeling in the market, Aaron, on Jarmo Kekalainen and John Davidson? Obviously, somebody had to vet this situation. I went back and I reread all of your stuff from July, and you were very kind of like, hey, like the Jackets have to be careful here. I hope they know what they're doing. Like all of you go back and look at your writing. So there was a lot of questions around the hiring from the onset, and I thought you were spot on in all of your stuff back in July. But how much of this now is on Kekalainen and Davidson? And is there going to be a groundswell of support or people saying, you know what, we got to topple this regime from the very top?
Yeah, well, so if you know how the Columbus market works or this organization works, the ownership group here, by my mind, is really all you could want in an ownership group. They put hockey people in charge and they back out. This is not Jerry Jones. This is not Mark Cuban. They let hockey people make hockey decisions. And overwhelmingly, from everything I've been told, the GMs here get what they want. We want Damon Severson for 8 years. You got it. This is your decision. You think this is the right move? You got it. You want to trade for Panarin? You got it. You want to move this player, that player? I mean, they've been supported by ownership a lot. This is one of those times where the ownership, I don't think, can just sit back and let hockey people continue to make hockey decisions. They have to be looking into this to see where this went wrong and who is making the decisions for them. Now, they would have supported the hiring of Mike Babcock. You don't just sign a coach to a 2-year, $8 million contract without ownership support. So they would know who went to bat for Babcock from day one. How do they wish to proceed? Again, much like the players, I think until further notice, Jarmo Kekalainen and John Davidson in some ways deserve, they have to own the hiring here. There's no question about this. But they deserve to answer the question, is this a different story now than what you thought it was early in the week? And as I've said, from the start here, if they were just attempting to hide this and make it go away, that's a not great look. That as an owner would concern me. But really the other way concerns me deeply as well, if I'm the owner, that your players feel more comfortable telling the truth, their experience to other people, including the PA, than they do to people in charge of this team. That's not a good look. So where did it go wrong here, and how do you fix that? I think there's a lot of sort of fallout here still to come.
I can imagine that. The one thing that I'm still kind of processing is the fact that the organization went through the trouble of I don't know the process as intricately as you might, but they had to have vetted Mike Babcock at some point throughout this process and deemed that he was worthy of a second chance, whether or not he was deserving of it. And then all this comes to a head, and all of these stories of the last few days leads us to this point. Like, was this risk really worth it? I don't get the sense that it really was for this organization. It wasn't.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, obviously now we can say that it wasn't. He didn't make it to opening night. He didn't run a single practice. I mean, has that ever happened in pro sports? I was reminded today of Mike Price, the Alabama coach who was hired and fired before he ever coached a game. I think Notre Dame hired a guy and fired him before because he lied on his resume. I don't, but I've never seen this in pro sports where a guy doesn't make it to opening night. Yeah, I mean, the strange thing here is I don't get the sense, certainly from his statement, certainly in our brief interaction the day that his statement was made, that Mike Babcock thinks he did anything wrong here. And in one sense, that's his best defense here. I didn't think I was doing anything wrong. It's also the worst possible proof that he still hasn't learned from anything that went sideways with players in Toronto. And I have to say, like there's a lot of people who are looking at this as, young players, this generation can't handle an old school coach, or, players are too soft and delicate now. I think that is completely unfair and irrelevant. This kind of stuff, the Mitch Marner story, as it's been relayed, that's not a healthy interaction with the player. And I don't care what generation it is. That never makes sense. The thing that this invasion of privacy, which is how at least some players perceived it here, that's never acceptable. Like, who has the right to dig through somebody else's bank statements, root through their purse, look through that? That's a private effect. Your cell phone is, your pictures on that, your interactions, your text messages, all of that is, it's your stuff. It's where you keep your life in a lot of ways for us now. And for someone to just to go through that, and again, it was different. At least they said it was different for Jenner and Gaudreau. Other players didn't take it that way. And apparently the PA believes them. And they felt that the Blue Jackets had to act here. I didn't like Babcock's statement that it was too big of a distraction. That makes it seem like everybody's response to this was more the issue than the fact that he actually did it. I mean, again, not recognizing where you've really gone off the rails here. So I know they don't. I know the Blue Jackets aren't probably big fans of Paul Bissonnette. Certainly, the way that this was delivered, he did him a huge favor in my mind by delivering this and letting this play out as it had to play out before it got worse or too serious as the season went on.
The one coach I can think of too that Bill Belichick coached the Jets for like a day. You remember that?
Yeah, that was by his choice, right?
Yeah. And he walked away and then went to New England. But yeah, it's a small list of professional coaches or, high coaches.
Crazy.
You get hired and you don't even coach a single game.
Yeah.
This is a really tough situation for Pascal Vincent to come into, because this is, I mean, let's be honest here. The only other thing I can think of is Jared Bednar in Colorado. Remember Patrick Waugh up and quit in August? And it was like Bednar was, you're thrown in there. This is a tough one. How does he navigate this?
And Bednar, of course, came from the Columbus organization.
Right.
So there's a link to that. And I think the Bednar thing was like, who? I don't think a lot of people knew him. He was a heck of a coach. It just won the Calder Trophy in Columbus. I'm not discounting that at all. I don't think he had a league-wide reputation at that point. I think Pascal Vincent is a little bit different. And I do think he is a very well-respected hockey mind. Strangely, the Blue Jackets passed over him twice for this job, which makes this even maybe a little more awkward. But I will say he has gained a lot of respect in the room. They didn't feel like, coming out of a first-time head coach, Brad Larson, that it was wise to go to another first-time head coach in Pascal Vincent at the time. They went to Babcock. They've had success here with demanding coaches in the past. Ken Hitchcock, John Tortorella. It's worked. So they went that direction again. Recklessly, we can now say, because the things that Babcock has been accused of certainly have never been put upon Hitchcock and Tortorella. But it's a tough job for Pascal Vincent. And really, honestly, at the start, it's not about hockey. There's a lot of hockey questions here. terms of, how your defensive pairs go, what your center depth chart looks like, all these things that are typically ruminated this time of year. His first order of business, by my thinking, is to just make sure that this room has everything out there and everyone is galvanized and united in the right way. And again, I've had a player tell me that they are. I'll take him at his word. That's a good sign. If I'm Pascal Vincent, that is really the focus of the early part of training camp. As tough as that is, because you got 65 guys here. It's not really even your group until you start making big whacks at it. But I would think the leadership group would be brought in. Well, they're probably tired of talking, but brought in for another come to Jesus here and make sure everything is out and on the table, and that the team can go forward from here.
We know Jarmo Kekalainen will be among those speaking today for Media Day. Do you think he should still continue as general manager of the Columbus Blue Jackets, considering his hire ultimately put the Blue Jackets in the mess they're in right now?
I'm going to reserve judgment on that one. I don't want to take this the easy way out of this or sidestep it, but I think it depends on truly. If I'm the ownership, I want answers for how they ended up with Babcock, and I think there should be consequences for hiring him clearly by it backfiring this quickly. It was the wrong hire. We can say that with certainty now. But I would want to know what did Jarmo Kekalainen and really what did John Davidson know, and when did they know it? Were they, because look, their best defense is that the NHL and the NHLPA, when they immediately looked at this, they came to the conclusion initially that this was a fairly innocent situation. Did they try their best? Did they try to just make this thing go away, or did they really try to root out the truth and the problem here? If I'm the ownership, if I'm the bosses of these guys, Mike Priest, the business side manager, John H. McConnell, the majority owner, I think those are very, very fair questions that have to be asked. I'm not sure what we'll learn today at Media Day on that front, if anything, but I would think that those questions will be asked as well.
Before we let you go, I got to ask you this. Towards the end of your column that you wrote on Sunday, you kind of outlined some of the missteps in Blue Jackets history, that how they've had various missteps over
yes, they have
the 20 some odd years. Yeah. I need to dig into a little bit about Boomer, who you described as I believe it was a phallic shaped mascot who lasted.
That's correct. That's correct.
Who actually technically lasted longer than Mike Babcock in that he got one game. Tell our listeners about Boomer the mascot for Columbus.
So the Blue Jackets introduced a third jersey. I want to say this is 2010. It's a really nice jersey, the third jersey with the cannon on it. This is the Blue Jackets, of course, is a Civil War reference. The Northern Army, the Union wore powder blue, and all of those coats were made at a warehouse in Columbus. So in a fairly anonymous city, that's a pretty good hook for a nickname. Go with it. So the cannon is here in the arena. That's a Civil War era cannon, 1857 Napoleon field gun. I know all these things. And they decide that, Boomer's a lot of fun, but Stinger is fun, and the kids kind of like Stinger a little bit, but he's also an insect, and it doesn't really drive home the point of the nickname. So let's get a Boomer, a Civil War, a cannon inspired mascot, and this gives the birth to Boomer, who I'm told, when vetted in a room, looked like a cannon. When seen before 17,000 people, it looked like this is an adult podcast, so I'm not sure what I can say. Kids may be listening. It looked like a phallic shaped, you know what?
You could say the medical term.
It looked like a penis. And here comes his initial, and the crowd just kind of goes, "Oh my!" And there's audible laughter. Now, at the risk of getting too profane, it gets worse. Boomer shot T-shirts out of the top of its phallic. Yes, and like, oh my god, and Boomer is never seen again. Finished the game, but Boomer, and I'm told somewhere in this building, I'm in Nationwide now ahead of Media Day. That Boomer mascot, the outfit, exists. It remains. It's still here somewhere. And there are lots of people. People made T-shirts that celebrate Boomer. It's become part of the mythical past of this team. But I mean, we covered that with stories for the next several days. Puck Daddy, a great friend of many in the media, Yahoo this was like a ball to him. He went with it forever. This was pre-Athletic. And the Dispatch, very conservative newspaper. I think we could say phallic shaped. That was as best we could describe it. But
you couldn't
Boomer
say penis is what you're saying.
What's that?
You couldn't say penis is what you're saying.
That is correct. Of the folklore of this team. And, it was embarrassing to a lot of people. It's embarrassing to management for sure. But I don't think people are embarrassed by it now. People joke about it. And every year someone says, bring back Boomer. Let's turn this thing around. Get Boomer out here. Let's go. And I kind of think they should, but it hasn't happened yet.
Wow. Listen, we appreciate all the time here, the insight, that little anecdote about the mascot, because, I don't think that's a story that everyone nationally knows about the Blue Jackets. So
it'll be in the book one day, Ian.
Yeah. Listen, busiest person in hockey today is Aaron Portzline. We thank him for dropping by the Athletic Hockey Show Monday edition. We're really looking forward to your coverage here the next couple of days as you speak to Kekalainen, Boone Jenner, Johnny Gaudreau, etc. Thanks so much for dropping by the pod.
Yeah, always a pleasure, guys. Thanks for having me.